So our cardiac hemodynamics. There's a mechanism that we look at called the Frank-Starling mechanism. All right, so it is operational within the fetal heart as well as the adult heart, and it's really looking at stroke volume. So stroke volume is that volume of blood that's pumped out of the heart with each beat. And so our Frank-Starling mechanism looks at stroke volume as it increases in response to increased blood volume in the ventricle. So it's a comparison of our stretch of our ventricle and the capacity of the ventricle to receive that blood that then is there at what we call preload. So preload is the end diastolic volume of flow. And so Frank-Starling mechanism is just really the amount that the ventricle can take, right? And so how far can that ventricle stretch at any given volume state in order to accommodate blood flow? And so then that then contributes to the stroke volume, because how much it brings in is how much it can, then we look at how much it can push out. So our stroke volume increases with increasing gestation, right? So normal stroke volumes, they increase very, very rapidly with increasing gestational age. So at like 20 weeks, we're looking at 0.7 milliliters of stroke volume. I mean, your heart's really tiny, right? But then it's at term, and this is on the right ventricle. At term, it's like 7.6 milliliters is the number for the right ventricle at term. So we go from 0.7 to 7 milliliters. That's a really significant change between 20 weeks and full term. And then on the left side, on the left ventricle, it goes from 0.7 milliliters to about 5 milliliters for term in the left ventricle. So again, stroke volume, and we'll talk about, so when we look at the right side of stroke volume versus the left side of stroke volume, right side of stroke volume is always higher. But left-sided stroke volume is related to higher pressure. So things shift postnatally as postnatal changes tend to take place. Then we have a change in pressure gradients that happen because the lungs then start working, and that vascular bed of the lungs no longer is this high resistive vascular bed at birth. Postnatally, it becomes a low vascular bed. So we have a low resistant flow pattern there. And so then it's bringing in all the flow that it can. So we have this shift that takes place between fetal flow versus postnatal flow. So, during gestation, let's talk about afterload as well. So afterload is the pressure that the ventricle has to push against. So in order to open up that semilunar valve, the aortic valve, so here, we have blood during diastole that is in the left atrium. It gets, the heart's at rest at that point, and so then we can passively have that blood volume going into that ventricle. At end diastole, that's our preload. That is what is in the ventricle ready to go out, right? And so then with systole, the heart's squeezing, and so it's pushing down, but what amount of pressure is needed to open up this semilunar valve, the aortic valve, to get that blood flow out? So that's the pressure difference, and the pressure gradient is that afterload piece. And so if there's, for whatever reason, maybe there's a blockage here and the valve is dysplastic, or maybe there's a stenosis there, our afterload pressure is increased in that. And so then the heart has to push a lot harder to be able to get that flow out. And so it affects the hemodynamics of the heart. It affects the force, the work, the stroke volume, all of those things get affected if there's any altering effect because of a pathology. So, the compliance of the heart is, again, looking at the changes in that. So, compliance looks at the stiffness of the heart, right? How well does the heart open up? How well does it relax? How stiff are those walls? And so the compliance of the left side of the fetal heart increases a lot more during later advancing gestations than the right side of the heart. So cardiac output in the fetus is really mainly affected by preload and then also that ventricular compliance piece. So as gestation advances, that compliance becomes more compliant. And so then we have an increase in cardiac output at that point as well. So that also helps contribute to an increase in our stroke volume. So that's kind of how those dynamics and relationships work together.